People may not know what a real accumulation phase is. And this kind of hit when you were saying, it's neither right nor wrong, because a lot of people will have transition. Sure. It's not really accumulation. Yeah. It's like accumulation with a transitional block in there. But when we're speaking about blocks and we're speaking about these phases, I think the best way for people to understand that is to go with exactly what it is. No transitions happening in between, because they get confused. Yeah. Right. So somebody will show, here's a accumulation block, but they have this, they're keeping the squat, as intensification, just lighter, but it's really not how it should be, but it works or doesn't, you know what I'm saying? Doesn't work. But people see that, then they're like, no, wait a minute. I thought it was supposed to be this. Linear periodization is the same way. I think Dave Ricks just told me for all of his career, it's like 8 weeks of 8s, 5 weeks of 5, 3 weeks of 3s, 1 week of 1s. I mean, you can't make that any more simple than what it is. And I'm sure there's overlap and stuff in there. So with an accumulation phase, you're looking at basically preparing for whatever that next phase is. So so I'm actually like a big advocate now, and this is another thing that's kind of changed over the last little while, is going lighter than you think you need to. I've really been focusing on like a lot of the recovery side of things. So I'll start people off at like 60%, where they go in and they do a workout and they're like, I don't feel like that was a hard training session. And I'm like, that's fine. That's what we want, Like, I'm talking about the main list. So I think you should always push your accessories super freaking hard. But on the main lifts, I think that there is a time and a place to kind of sort of deload them. Deload's not the right word, but start off where you're kind of building a little bit more of a base, giving your body time to recover, and then just slowly building back up again. Whereas like I might be doing, so for instance, like this block, I started doing, for my day one bench press, I'm doing 3x8. And then the next week I'm going to do, so it's 3x8 at 60%. Next week I'm going to do, like 4x7, then 5x6. So it's very basic, and I'm adding 5% each week. And then after that, I go back to 3x8, but I increase by 5%. And then I'm just doing that. So it's pretty linear in that sense. So the first couple of weeks are not that hard, right? But if I start doing like dumbbell press or like a cable fly cluster set or something like that, that's where you really get the opportunity to just completely trash your muscles. But again, the objective is not lifting weight. The objective is actually messing up your muscles. So gaining a lot of hypertrophy, gaining more range of motion when you're doing your pec flies, not just moving weights. And so we still maintain a really high intensity of effort, but it's concentrated on a lot of the accessory movements. So your primary movements can be more skill-based, and then we can build up volume. And then by the time you reach those higher intensities, all of a sudden you're like, oh, wow, this actually feels way easier than the last time I was doing this weight in the previous block. And that's a really good indication in my mind that we're making great progress. So even the other day I was telling you, like, yeah, it was a light day, but at the same time, I know what that feels like. And doing it, especially after having traveled for like 12 hours or 14 hours or whatever my flight was, I was really surprised. I was like, okay, I know that I'm getting stronger. And a lot of that is because of how I'm managing my recovery and the volume. And so I think that's a really big thing that I tend to focus on when we're doing accumulation blocks, and just kind of sort of building up the volume. And I tend to focus a lot on building up a lot of deficits, both from a skill standpoint as well as like a muscular standpoint. And then a lot of emphasis on techniques, a lot of emphasis on like controlling the execution and even just the setup of the exercise and a lot of that type of stuff. Because then when we actually get to more of the neural stuff, that's a little bit more just about like high power output. What do you mean by building up deficits?
So like if I see someone who's squatting and every time they squat and they come back up, their hips kick back, right? To me, I'm like, okay, they're really like they have a quad weakness, right? That's a pretty common indicator. Or if you can see someone banging out 10 reps or whatever, but then you add 50 pounds and all of a sudden they can't do it. Then I'm like, okay, in this particular case, maybe that person has like insufficient eccentric loading capacity, right? So, a lot of people have seen like the whole Cal Dietz thing, the triphasic, where it's like, if we have a steeper inclination of like how fast we can eccentrically load, then we can concentrically load faster. And if we have more of a graded line of where we have to go slower, we can't concentrically explode after, right? And so you can kind of look at the different contraction types and say, okay, where are people's deficits? And so if I'm doing like, quote unquote triphasic type block, let's say, which I'm actually in right now, I'll work on my eccentric strength, and that would be a deficit that I have in my squat. And so that's going to progress to eventually pausing at 90 degrees on the way down, because that's when I tend to be the weakest. And then after I come out of that, then I can kind of start pushing more load. But because I've taken the time to address my eccentric weakness and like my isometric weakness, now that's not going to be a rate limiting factor for when I go into the neural side of things and I just start pushing heavier loads. So I can actually push, and I don't need to be worried as much about risking injury or just burning out or getting banged up during that process. And so just kind of trying to find whatever deficits, and a lot of the times it's technical deficits. But then especially if you have athletes who have been doing this for a long time, a lot of times you have muscular deficits as well, where you get a guy with like a massive back and like huge shoulders, and then his chest is like, there's nothing there. And so you can be like, okay, well, maybe we need to work on your pecs, because if you have bigger pressing muscles, you're probably going to be able to press more muscle. You'll probably be able to press more.
When you're using those eccentric isometric methods like Caldita's stuff, are you running them how he kind of writes it, where you have specific blocks that focus on just that single quality, or are you blending them together and focusing on, say, eccentric and isometric in a single block? Because see, how he writes it would be eccentric one block, isometric the next, concentric, which is one way of doing it. But personally, I find that ends up, with a lot of athletes, that ends up taking too long. Or you don't have enough time to run a significantly long enough block by the time they have to peak again, or whatever it might be. So how do you approach that?
Yeah, well, I mean, especially for a higher level athlete, like if you look at his protocols, it's like, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's like 6 to 8 reps of like 8 to 10 seconds each. You know what I mean? Could you imagine like some of the guys who are lifting here trying to do that? They would do 2 sets and that would be it. They'd be done for like the week. Sure. So I think his protocol, you kind of have to understand that his protocol is designed for field sport athletes mostly, right? And so he has a completely different demographic than strength athletes or, bodybuilders or whatever. But I guess we'll kind of stay towards strength athletes. And so I don't do it like he does, but I kind of take the same basic premise, and I'll usually run like, maybe 3 to 4 weeks or something like that of the eccentric. And then I'll go into isometric, and that'll usually be about like 3 weeks. So maybe let's say 6 weeks total ish, give or take. And I find that that's a good amount of time, because if you go too much longer than that, I find you're probably going to get pretty beat up from it. Yeah. And I don't know that you'd get a whole lot more out of it. Now, in terms of like the rep scheme and things like that, I personally, what I'm doing right now, and again, there's a million different ways to do it, but what I'm doing right now is like a single with 10-second eccentric. And then I do 3 sets back off of 5 reps with a 5-second eccentric. And I'll maybe drop the loading by like 20% or 15% or something like that, And then as I progress, I'm going to go from like 10 and 5 second eccentrics to 7 and 4, 5 and 3. And then after that, I'll drop to a 3-second pause, which is the isometric phase. And I'll do that. For me, my weak point is as I'm going down, I'll stop at 90-degree, knee flexion angle. And then I'll drop the rest of the way and come back up. And in that one, I think it's important to be able to absorb it quickly. So you don't necessarily want to go down slowly, hit that pause, and then go back down. The eccentric, you definitely want to be very slow. But when you're doing the isometric, I think what people mess up is you want to be able to absorb it really fast. Yeah. So you want to be able to go down fast and just stop instantly and have no movement. And then, I'll do like a 3-second pause, and then you go back down and come back up. And that really, really helps kind of build your tolerance for that type of loading. And so when you have the tolerance for the loading, then you can actually build up just more base, and you can build up more neural drive after the fact. And so that's what I've been doing, and I find it's pretty effective. But again, there's a million ways to skin a cat.
You mentioned obviously like accumulation is a good time to look for deficits and that type of thing. So when you're looking at methods like that, like the eccentrics, like the pauses at the midpoint and things like that, do you have kind of ranges that you look for to expect people to be able to handle? Like, for example, you said the single with a 10-second eccentric. Like, is there a ballpark figure you would expect a powerlifter, strength athlete, or whatever to be able to perform of their regular 1 rep max that would say to you, this is not an issue, or perhaps this is an issue? And I know that's a loaded question.
Yeah, so. I mean, I maybe other people do. I don't necessarily have those figures. For me, it's more just like an experience thing. You can kind of look at someone and be like, this is kind of, it's sort of the coaching intuition. Yeah. That's, I wish I had a better answer. No. But I'll look at someone and you can just kind of tell like when they come out of the hole, they're just not very strong. You know what I mean? Like they're kind of like wobbling, and it's not that the weight is that hard because they can do a couple of reps, but they just don't look strong eccentrically. And so for me, that's usually what I'll look at and be like, okay, we probably need to do this, or probably need to mix in some of this. And that's usually what it is. It's just kind of the coaching eye sort of thing.
So like looking shaky on the way down, maybe the bar path kind of like moving back and forth.
Yeah,
there, or something like that.
It's that, but then it's also just like, especially if they're doing reps. So if you're doing like 5 reps, but on rep number 1, I'm like, on the way down, I'm like, ooh, this is looking real shaky. And then you go up and it's fast. And I'm like, okay. And then every rep looks like you're going to fail. I'm like, okay, we probably need to do some eccentric loading. We probably need to, especially if you're getting down and then like, let's say about here, you start really shaking. That's usually, if someone's really shaky in their squat or in their bench or whatever it might be, that's usually where I'll put in the isometric.
Sure.
A lot of the times people, when they're doing pause squats, they might pause at the bottom because, you know, it's like, oh, I'm weak out of the hole or whatever. I tend to do it wherever that individual shaking most, because I think that's a pretty good indication of where there's the least amount of stability there, hence the shaking. And I found pretty good success with that.
Sure.
So
have you found that with eccentrics and the isometrics, the concentric, that's a different weird topic for me because I don't understand how outside of like a deadlift or even a pin press, you still got to lower it unless you just drop it.
Sure.
So we'll just leave that one off the table because that one's always kind of confused me a little bit. It just, to me, it's just the beginning of the next strength block. Have you found that the adaptations are fast? Right. So if you're working somebody on their eccentric or even the isometric, 1 or 2 weeks, it's, you know, that's a hard question to answer. Like, where should that be?
Sure.
And say if it's 50% or whatever it's going to be, because within 2 weeks, it can go radically fast because it's either detrained or I don't want to say it's detrained. It's neurally, they're not focusing on that at all. So the first week is like, this is weird. Then the second week, boom. Then the third week, bam. Then it just caps. Then it's really hard. Have you found that to be the case with both of those?
Yeah, definitely. And that's one of the reasons why, like, I'll kind of keep those blocks about 3 to 4 weeks long, because I find it's really fatiguing for people if you do them too long, especially for stronger lifters. But then also, like you said, the skill side of things, like you get so good so quickly at it that there's not a whole lot you can squeeze out of it for too long. So
that's where I always would get confused about if I would run that, because the skill acquisition is going to be the first 2, maybe 3 weeks, right? Then there's not much else to milk after that. Then I'm like, did this really actually do anything, or did they just become more efficient at it? Because the real gains come after the skill acquisition has been acquired, right? You see where I have my little stumbling block with that is, but then it becomes harder to progress unless you started lighter, I suppose, or bigger tempos, or created some kind of runway.
Yeah, so that's actually a really interesting point of discussion, because this is something I've thought about quite a lot as well. So there's a couple ways that I'll think about this. So, you know, you mentioned starting lighter. My problem personally with starting lighter is if you start lighter and you're doing eccentrics, I don't think you're getting enough out of it. I just think it's too far away from what you're trying to accomplish. You're just not really going to get that much out of it. At least is my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong, and then if you go too heavy, you're just going to completely wipe yourself out. And so there kind of seems to be that sweet spot where if you do it, you're definitely getting skill. You're definitely getting more awareness around like your positioning. And so I definitely think that's part of the adaptive process. But I also do find that there are structural adaptations, just in the sense that when I'm looking at people lifting, they don't have the same instability. And I don't know if that could be necessarily corrected just through skill alone. That's what I suspect. I don't know if that's like, I can't validate that, but that's kind of what I would suspect. So I think it's a bit of both. It's hard to say how much of each, but that's something I've noticed in some of my athletes, and that's something that I'm definitely noticing in myself when I do this. And you just feel stronger, you feel more stable, and you don't have that same, I don't know. It's almost like if you do like heavy unracks. You know, you unrack like, let's say 10, 15, 20% more than your max, whatever, and you hold it for a minute and you put it back. It's almost like the sort of super compensation effect. I know it's not super compensation, but that's almost how it feels, where after you unrack, when you squat down normally, you're just like, oh, that feels like nothing. So whether that's a skill thing, whether that's like some sort of myofascial adaptation, whether it's a combination, I would suspect it's probably both. I don't know how much of each it is, but it's, yeah. Like the question is something that's really like tormented me as well.
Well, I think for anybody that's like geeking out on program, this is the one question that people who really are like into it and geek over it are infatuated with. And it's the question that all those that, I don't want to say aren't good, but all those that are just programming for programming's sake never think about.
Yeah.
Right. Because they see the progress, but they don't understand that a lot of that progress is just skill acquisition because the person's never done that movement before. But then you change it before you actually start to get any real adaptations or strength out of it. And they don't know that if they were, if they were better at what they did, they would be able to run it for a few more weeks because they would know how to actually program instead of just switching shit for the sake of switching shit. And that happens more times than not. And I get it, because if somebody's working with 40 clients or 50 clients, it's hard to manage, and it's easy to keep things in 4, 6 week, 2 week, whatever blocks it's in, just because you don't, your primary exercise could be on a linear 10-week run. Secondary could be changing every 2 or 3 weeks. And this is coaching, right? So, but that's a lot harder to implement with a large number of people than everything's just going to change in 4 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'd be really interested, actually. I'm going to be very selfish here. I'd be interested to know how you would do something like that, or if you even do anything like that.
What, the eccentrics and pausing and stuff like that?
Yeah. Like how you would structure something like that. Because you're talking about the timeline, right?
I would base it as a secondary movement on a weak point, right? So it's I try to have everything in 3-week waves. Yeah. Right. Caveats, right? Yeah. Unless, it's a beginner and it's going to run more linear, because more linear old school periodization for somebody that's just getting started most of the time is going to outperform anything that's out there. Right. Nobody wants to admit that because it's not pretty. It's not sexy. It's just basic shit, but it is how it is. And if something pops up, like they don't have the intent on the bottom of a box squat. Right. So first I'm going to try to address it by just addressing it. Like stand up faster. Like, can this be addressed with the easiest thing? But it can be what you're talking about. It can be their eccentric strength. They're just getting fucking tanked because they suck eccentrically. So they have nothing really to come back with out of that, or they're just weak out of that bottom position, which could be that. So after the primary movement, I would stick in, slower tempo. Is probably where I would go first before I would go with pauses. Because pauses, especially on a squat, are mentally hard for somebody to manage, right? Because especially if it's sub-maximal, I mean, you're getting down in there and you're like, oh, fuck. Then you're not really getting the intent that you want because their stress is so high. Their mental stress is so high that now that's becoming more added shit to recover from. But I would run it based on the week, man. So it's maybe 1 or 2 times. So if I see it on a Saturday squat session, they'll do something on that day, then something midweek, and then we'll see how next Saturday looks. A lot of the times this is just neural, and it's not even really a weak point. It's just, lack of a better word, neural retardation. I don't know what to call it, right? And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, they remember, boom, it's back. Okay, this really wasn't a weak, I guess it was. I wouldn't call it a weak point.
Right. Yeah.
Now, if it's still there, then it's like, okay, we got to think this out a little bit. Like this is now going to become some 3 or 4 week thing that's going to have to progress and so forth. But I try to test it first. Because it can be a bad day. It can be a lot of different things. Right. Yeah. A lot of the times it's just, and the people out here are intermediate to advanced. So a lot of the times it's just them not knowing how to keep a contraction in a certain area. Right. They're for some reason their upper back doesn't want to keep their shoulders down and tight when they're benching. Well, why is that? Is their upper back weak? They pull 700 pounds. They bench like 400. It's probably not their upper back being strong enough to be able to stabilize this. They either don't know what they're doing, or it just needs, for lack of a better word, like reactivated and then kind of put in. But to your point, if it has to run out, then it's probably, in my brain, I'm looking at 3 weeks minimum, and then some kind of accumulation week, just some week just to get used to this is what you're doing. And it will be under what you're talking about. It will be too light.
Mm-hmm.
But most people don't do slow eccentrics. Most people don't do any type of pausing. They don't do any of that. So the first week, it's kind of like teasing them to where they think, man, that wasn't that bad. You're like, yeah, okay. It was also just, it was 50%. And actually this shit's going to 70%. It's going to be a different story. And then go from there, then hope after that block that issue has been resolved. But I'll also look for what accessories can also address that same issue that aren't going to increase the fatigue ratio too much. So if it's weak out of the bottom, it can be quads too, right? So we can throw in some light leg extensions at the end. If they can't recover from 3 sets of 20 on a leg extension, then we have greater underlying problems that probably need to filter out of the block and go more into just a full accumulation block, which I would define that kind of more along the lines of how Bumpa would with anatomical adaptation. It's not easy, right? But it's working from the fingers and toes in instead of from the core out, which is kind of what the strength blocks would do. And nobody likes to do it. Nobody, so you sneak that shit in after a meet. It's like, just do all this crap. And it's from the strength athlete standpoint, it's kind of sad that they don't like to do that, because that's building the base for the next time, but they take it about half as serious as what they would do a peaking phase.
Yeah.
I mean, I think with the eccentric stuff specifically, for me, the time frame would depend what you want out of it, right? Like if we're talking skill acquisition, neurological adaptation, that's like a software issue, right? That can happen really fast. So if you're doing like an intense eccentric method, like weight releasers, negative only reps, supermax, whatever, 2 or 3 weeks of that, you're cooked, and you have probably milked 99% of what you're going to get out of it. If we're looking at tendon, microtendon development, there's even some studies showing that you get more hypertrophy at the distal end of your muscle towards the tendon insertion and things like that from eccentric only work. Then obviously, if you're looking for a structural adaptation from it, what are you actually going to get in 2 or 3 weeks? It's not going to be a lot, right? So then maybe it needs to be run in the background for several blocks, but then it could be done on accessories and smaller movements rather than those prime movers. And sometimes methods like that, you mentioned you've got a guy who just likes to go hard all the time in the gym, right? And that applies to a lot of people. Sometimes those methods can be a really good way of letting them push hard on some compound lifts without actually trashing themselves. They can go to RPE 9 on their SSB squat, say for 6 reps, but it's done with an 8-second eccentric. So what's the load actually going to be then? Which, sure, it's still RPE 9, but RPE 9 at 300 pounds as opposed to 500 pounds is a different animal, right? For their nervous system, at least. So, if you're someone who wants to kind of map out their roadmap to a meet, and they kind of don't want them lifting above X amount as we go through the blocks, and we want the average load to increase, then those type of methods just give you a way of incrementally working that up as you go through, while still giving them the satisfaction of I pushed a squat or deadlift or whatever hard, right? And still making them feel like they're doing something, because like you said, a lot of the time, if it's not intense enough, they'll just put nothing into it.
Yeah, I mean, it's always interesting hearing like other people's perspectives on this, because like I said, there's a million ways to skin a cat. I kind of like what you were talking about, though. I feel like that would permit you to do it for much, much longer. And yeah, I mean, I guess if you're talking about some of the physiological adaptations that would actually occur, I could definitely see an argument for requiring longer blocks. I guess for me, part of what I wonder, though, is like how does that change when you're doing it on like, let's say you're doing it just on the primary lift versus if you're doing it more as like a block where you have concentrated periods where you're doing, let's say, you got your squat eccentric, but then you're doing like some sort of eccentric Nordic curl or other things like that. And like, would the density affect the physical adaptations as opposed to just being skill acquisition from like a motor control standpoint. And so I don't know. Again, these are still things that I like think about, but yeah, I mean, it makes sense what you're saying though. Like, yeah.
But, every method's got pluses and minuses, right? Like we can say for the eccentric stuff, if we're looking at hypertrophy, you could argue that it's probably going to be better for hypertrophy. It'll use less load. There'll be more time under tension. They'll probably get better contractions, etc. But there's going to be more muscle damage because most of the muscle damage occurs in the eccentric. So then they can handle less volume. So there's always going to be a trade-off, right?
Yeah.
So that's why, in my opinion, like I really like Cal Dietz's stuff, but personally, I don't like to do a whole block where it's just eccentric, just isometric, because I think whatever the negative side effect of the method is you're using, if you put it on everything, it accumulates too much.
Oh, I definitely wouldn't do it on everything.
And then I think
I just mean the main.
Yeah,
the main
I mean
thing,
that's
and
kind of the
maybe
big
like an
caveat
accessory.
here is nothing really happens in isolation.
Yeah.
Sure.
Right. So even if you are just trying to, if it's a full only eccentric block, you're telling me there's no concentric contractions happening.
Yeah.
There are, and even if it's a field athlete, it's happening in their sport skill practice.
Yeah.
So it's still there. So there's the art of how to blend all this, which brings us into another topic, because now you have the recovery from the training session, where it's fun, the longer that you're around, to be able to see how these things just kind of like come in phases. Like recovery it's starting to, I think it kind of like peaked and now it's starting to go back out to where people are now saying, you have to actually have a training stimulus to recover from, right? Because it did become such this big thing that they're scared, like, oh shit, I just need to do one exercise, train it kind of hard, but then I need to make sure I'm sleeping 12 hours a day, getting all the fluid, getting all this. And it's like, you're not doing enough. You can fucking sleep 4 hours if you're doing one thing once a week. It's not that big of a deal, but it's the balance that kind of comes through there. You got to have the training be hard enough, and that will start to become more popular. It already is, to where people are saying, oh, wait a minute. Like, are we kind of overdoing this recovery shit and not talking enough about the fact that you need to train actually hard to create a stimulus to recover from?
Yeah, well, I should have given that as a caveat, actually. So yeah, like if you're doing an eccentric block, the whole block is not eccentric. It's kind of like when you're saying training to failure. Like you're not taking every set of every exercise of the entire block to failure. It's like you're doing it in kind of selected periods. So that was my bad for not saying that. Yeah, well, there still should be some distinction between accumulation block and an intensification block, or a hypertrophy block or a strength block, or whatever people want to be able to call that. And if somebody was to look at that block that knows what they're doing, they would know this is that. And if they don't, then even in conjugate, it's like, what are you doing? Right, because it can't stay the same block all the time. Something has to be physically changing throughout that whole thing. And in the strength world, I do think that the accumulation block is very underrated, right? Because they're afraid they're going to get weak or whatever.
Do you think that's because people are just too scared to take an actual step?
I think it's
not
that,
a step back, but you know what I mean when I say a step back, like step away from the heavier stuff. Trust that you're not just going to become incompetent at the main lifts, and actually work on the groundwork stuff that you've probably neglected for a long time, right? I think it's that, and I think it could also be, I may be giving more credit than what it's due, that a lot of top lifters, they're not posting those blocks. No. So all they ever see are the intensification or peaking blocks. And so upcoming lifters are like, this is all I need to do is to squat heavy singles and triples. That's it, no accessories, and then just get out. And because that's what they see. I think I had Dave Ricks out here last week, and we were talking about when lifters follow other lifters online, it's good, right? Because it's aspirational, right? Sure. But at the same time, if they walk it out, you normally don't see their walkout because they're clipping it to be just that one rep. So you're not seeing that there's 3 very deliberate steps. You're not seeing how they approach the bar. So there's a lot of things online that top lifters just don't post, and I get it. Nobody wants to see them like walk up or how they do their warm-ups or how many warm-ups they do and all these other type of things. So it could be misleading to the ignorant, choosing my words wisely here, because I don't want to say uneducated. They just don't know. And then that's what they see. I'm like, well,
so-and-so does this, so I have to do that. And it would be nice if when they do go through these phases where they're not as strong, they actually post some of this shit.
Yeah.
And then why they're doing it. And coaches like yourself, but both you guys, I mean, you're posting the stuff, and that has impact because people can read it, they can understand that. But the athletes who really need to read it probably aren't reading it because they're following who they want to aspire to be like and just looking at the sets and the reps they post, if they even do that.
Yeah, I think there's also an experiential gap too, because it's like, how many times have you heard people talk about, they come back from an injury, and after they come back from the injury, they're like, oh man, this is something I'm really prioritizing now. And now I'm focusing on this with all my clients. And it's like, it's that injury is what catalyzed that decision to actually emphasize that as, like their prehabilitation or, injury prevention strategy, whatever it might be. And I think that once you actually start utilizing, I don't want to say lighter blocks, but relatively speaking, lighter blocks, and you go through it and you're like, man, yes, I am, I have easier workouts. And again, easy is a relative term, but I have easier workouts. But then every time by the end of the block, I'm getting stronger and I'm not as beat up. My recovery's better. I'm not dreading my workouts anymore. And it's like, there's like kind of this natural phase where, you can't just always be going hard all the time. And I know everyone talks about like, oh, you can't lift heavy all the time. But it's kind of the same thing about when people talk about individualization for a program. Like, I don't know any coach who says that they don't do individualized training, but at the same time, like 99% of people aren't individualizing anything. So I think there's a lot of lip service paid to that. But then I think there's a bit of an experiential deficit as well, where when you've gone through that, period where you're like, oh, okay, I'm doing this. It feels lighter. I want to go heavier, but I'm just going to stick to the plan, see what happens. And then you do it. And all of a sudden you're like, wow, I am way bigger. I feel way better. My joints aren't banged up. And now when I'm going into my, intensification cycle where I'm starting to lift heavier, like it feels better. Like when I unrack the weight, I know what it felt like last time. Now it feels better when I'm moving it. It's just everything seems to be kind of progressing. And sometimes it's a bit counterintuitive to people, especially like dummies like myself who just like to go in and smash their head into the wall every day. I think it's just kind of a thing that you have to learn over and over and over again. Because even right now, I find myself wanting to push heavier, but I'm just having to literally have a conversation with myself every day and just be like, no, I shouldn't do it. I shouldn't do it. Yesterday I'm deadlifting and I'm doing light block pulls with like 500 pounds or whatever. I can't remember her name, but that girl is like benching 500. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so I'm just sitting here like, man, what a bitch I am, And but then I was like, okay, this is feeling super easy. I'll just toss on a little bit more weight. And I'm like, nope, stick to the plan. And I did, and I was really proud that I did that, which I know sounds really stupid, but the thing is, that's always been my issue in the past, is trying to push too hard for exactly the reason you said. It's like, oh, I'm not working hard enough, and I think I get caught up in this, and I think a lot of people get caught up in this, and maybe it's an experience deficit, I don't know, but where you gauge a workout by how it felt.
Yeah. Well, I think the answer to that is you have to have a tastier goal in mind.
Yeah.
A bigger thing that's happening 10 weeks later, to where in your head you're like, man, I really want to do this, and maybe I could, but next week is supposed to be 540, or whatever you're going to jump to. And if I overextend here, then that 540s might be a grind. And then it's not worth that, because what I really want is like the 700, which is further down the road.
Right.
And that, for most lifters that have that mentality, the worst thing you want to do is to get to that day where you want the biggest thing, and then to think in your head, damn it, it's either I didn't do this, or I shouldn't have done X, Y, and Z. So the more attractive that shiny object is, the better the compliance could be, which becomes an issue when you're no longer competing. And you have to find whatever that shiny object's going to be, and really care about it. And that's with that certain mindset. Because what happens is a clusterfuck if there's nothing that they really care about that's there. Because like, fuck it, I at least get to train one more time. So if I die tomorrow, I got the good one in. And that becomes a very dangerous mindset.
Yeah. Well, Tom and I were talking about this the other day about just longevity in sport, and how a lot of the times people will say, oh, health and performance are not the same thing, and it's like, I get I get the statement, you know, like I get where they're coming from, because yeah, you can blast a bunch of trend and have a crazy performance. And so it's like, yeah, that's not going to be very healthy for you. But at the same time, if you extend that timeline out 5-10 years, it's like health and performance have to be aligned, and there has to be some sort of synergy there, or else you're just going to get completely beat up, or you're going to have some major health issues. You're going to have injuries. You're going to have things like that. So it's like, you know, a lot of the times you have to have that long-term focus in mind, where it's like, hey, yeah, I'd like to hit that 700 squat at my next comp, but what I'd really like is to hit an 800-pound squat maybe in 5 or 7 years down the road, or whatever it might be, right? And I think that if you just, like you were saying, where you keep that goal in mind, and you just look at the little wins and you say, okay, if I do this today, that's going to get me closer to this. Like squatting a big number today is not going to get me closer to that necessarily. It's like following the plan, following the appropriate plan is going to get you closer. And you might not always feel like it, and it's just really boring and really stupid, but it's the boring, stupid shit that just is really effective and that works over time. And it's, yeah, it takes a lot of discipline, but I think sometimes people don't necessarily prioritize the longevity side of things and their health. Like you look at Dan Green, like he's like in his mid 40s and he's still pulling like 8 something, like or 9 almost. It's like, that's absurd, you know? And it's like, yeah, he's hit a lot of injuries, but at the same time, very clearly he takes his injuries seriously and he trains like intelligently, or else he wouldn't have been able to do that. And how many people, especially now with Instagram, you see so many people who like come in, they're a flash in the pan, they're insanely strong. You're like, oh dude, everyone's screwed now that this guy's here. And then after a year, they're just gone because of whatever injuries. And you're like, oh, that's really unfortunate, you know? But
everybody's going to have a certain genetic peak limit.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not saying that that's their cap. I mean, you can always go above, you know, whatever that is. And you can get there fast, you can get there slow, you can get there in medium time. It's just depending upon how far you want to be able to push things. But it would suck to hit that point, because everything changes when you hit that point. Training, everything changes, because now the micro shit becomes really important. Because then everything matters. So when you're on that uphill, younger, blasting shit or whatever, everything's fast. But it would suck to get there and only have 2 years left because you're that beat up. You know, because you expedited something that should have taken 5-6 years and pushed it into 2. And then you get there, then all of a sudden 2 years, you're done. You know, where if it took the 5 years, then you're running that advanced phase, I suppose, for a decade. I mean, Dave Rick's just 64 or whatever he was. He's still competing. His first meet was in 82. He's 64 years old. That's wild. It's like unbelievable, you know, but there's long off seasons, you know, there's thought that kind of goes into it. Now, of course, when he was younger, like everybody else, to do stupid shit, but you're supposed to learn from that while you're younger, because you can get away with it when you're younger. And the problem is when they don't, you know, change the things or blast too much. But back to your point though, health still matters, because if your health is for shit, you can't recover. So if you take a boatload of training and your blood pressure's through the roof, yeah, maybe you might have to do a bro split of training one body part per day, because that's all your body can actually recover from, because it's still got to recover from all the medication and shit that you're dumping in there. So it matters. And that's why those phases are good, where we had that giant recovery. 10 years of recovery is more important than the training type of thing, because then people start to take their eye and think, well, maybe my health does matter. Maybe I don't need to be purple, you know, maybe I don't need to be, you know, 40 pounds over what my competitive weight should be, you know, healthier, recover better. And that's a good thing. You know, it can also lead into stupid shit, you know, like people rucking 5 miles every single day during a peak phase, you know.
Do you think though that there's like a misconception, maybe let's just take powerlifting as a specific example, that any intense productive training cycle creates damage? In this term, damage, we're going to talk maybe cumulative inflammation, loss of function in some degree, whether it's overhead mobility, whatever that might be. And I just think that bit gets lost, right? So if you said to someone, someone just trained for a marathon, and at the end of the marathon, you can imagine the state of their hips, their knees, their ankle. Like most people can get their head around that, why they would really need to tailor it back, and maybe why you wouldn't go running on concrete for a month or something. But I think within powerlifting and strength sports, we don't take that same approach and realize that nothing comes without cost. So the best training cycle that you've ever had also may have come with the greatest recovery cost and the greatest damage. And that, although you had a good day at the meet, that doesn't mean that all of that isn't lying under the surface still. You know, you carry that through, and that needs to be dissipated before, as you would say, you're ready to start again, like another prep or whatever. And I just think people are always assuming that just if they can squat, bench, and deadlift, they're okay.
Yeah.
But they might be slowly losing motor control, motor function, you know, whether that's like, you know, you mentioned like thoracic mobility and all that type of thing. All of that stuff can be slowly caving in. And then eventually it shows on the competition lifts.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, fuck.
That's also, most of the time, it's usually happening with increase in muscle mass and weight gain and all those other things. So those things alone, if it was just hypertrophy training and that was it, which could be lower damage, accumulated damage, they're still losing the mobility and all that. So they're losing it for a couple different reasons too. But they get in that mindset of, I'll take a couple weeks off after the meet, but if I don't start, I'm going to get weak. I'm like, of course you're going to get weak, but you're going to get stronger at other things. You know, and then to your point, then when you start training again, you know, going into a prep block or whatever it is, yeah, the weights are probably going to feel heavy when you start loading them back on again, but not for long. But what's not going to, you have two choices. The weights can feel heavy, and then you're going to you're going to accumulate to it, and it's going to be a better prep, or the weights can feel heavy and your elbows still hurt, your shoulders still hurt, and your knees still hurt. So which is better, right? And maybe the weight doesn't feel as heavy. So let's just say the weight doesn't feel as heavy, but it still feels heavier, but all your shit hurts. I'd rather go in with everything not hurting and, you know, a sub-maximum weight feeling heavier than it should, than that feeling easy, but limping away. You know, and that's kind of that pattern that they get caught up in, which is interesting to me. It really is, because the other thing that we see happen a lot is people will just default into the singles and triple training blocks. And my theory on that is they stumble across that because they accidentally or intentionally went through a peaking block. You know, for some reason, if it wasn't before a meet, that they had a vacation, they had a lot of work, so all they could do was go in and do the heavy stuff. They couldn't do anything. They just reduced the volume, increased the intensity, and they're like, holy shit, I'm way stronger. I don't have to do all that other crap. And I really think this is how that happens. And then that deteriorates, you know, over a period of time too, because all the supportive tissues become weaker, the contractile.
Well, you got to have something to peak from.
Yeah.
Can't peak from a peak, right? I think it's just, although, you know, maybe powerlifting doesn't have a huge amount of demands in terms of skills and mobility or whatever, but there is only so much function, general function, you can lose before your ceiling just will get capped. You know, like if you're an 800-pound squatter who can't do a split squat with your body weight, you might not think that's a big deal until you have to walk out a squat or something. Do you know what I mean? Like,
no, I totally know.
At some point, all of that, and you know, some people might get to 800 pounds before they have to actually address that. Some people will get to 300 pounds, but at some point, there is only so specialized you can be before you have to go back and address all the stuff, the hundreds of things you suck at that allow you to get better at the two or three things you want to be really good at.
One of the biggest mistakes I made over my whole career was that, you know, so if it was an injury or surgery or whatever it was, you know, the first rule is you need to regain full range of motion. You know, I don't disagree with that, but the way I defined it was differently than the surgeon or anybody advising me. Like, that's, to me, I need to be able to bench, you know, so my hands here, and if I expand my ribs and arch, it's a little bit higher, and squat to legal depth. That's my full range of motion. You know, once I'm there, fuck it, I'm good. Right back into it. You know, looking back, that's not right. You know, it's I should have maintained that tissue strength beyond with those lifts. You know, because the way I benched it was not a very long stride. It was like 5 inches. And so now if I could do a Larson press, you know, open my back, flare my lats, it's 14. So there's a big difference in the range of motion with the shoulders, and obviously a ass to grass squat compared to a parallel squat, completely different. But that's how I saw it. And I'm sure that's how a lot of other lifters saw it, where going back, it wouldn't have been that hard
it doesn't
to
take too
restore
much.
those abilities over 5 weeks after a meet. And it wouldn't be that hard to maintain them either,
Couple of goblet squats
Yeah,
at the start
yeah.
of your workout.
Yeah.
And stuff like that.
So I think that I don't think it's as bad today as it was when I was doing all this stuff, but I do think it's still bad, really bad.
It is. A lot of the times too, I think the most common thing that people will see, especially coaches will know this, is someone's in pain. You start some sort of rehab program. They get out of pain and they're like, oh, awesome. And they just continue training. They stop doing all this shit. And it's like, dude.
Well, the truth of that
working.
too, though, is they never really got out of pain, right? They got to manageable pain.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing too, is a lot of the times people don't understand there's a variety of different stages, but generally, like when you're looking at physical therapy and rehabilitation, there's return to training, which is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
People get to that. But then there's return to performance.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, your tissues are fine and now you can train again and not be in pain or have manageable pain. But what's going to happen when you reach that peak? Is your body going to hold up or is it just completely going to break down again? And because, they get out of pain or it's like so low that it's just not a non-issue, they just kind of put it on the back burner. And it's like, okay, coming back to your point again about, am I going to get weaker? Or, oh, wow, this is working. I'm getting so strong, when you're doing your peaking cycle. And it's like, okay, but dude, that's a strength expression. That's a neurological function. And so you're not losing your strength. Like if you go from peaking and then, let's say 2 weeks later, you're doing, let's say sets of 10 and 12, and it feels heavy or whatever it is. It's like, it doesn't feel heavy because you're weaker. It feels heavy because you're used to doing singles.
Mm-hmm.
Like your nervous system was peaked and now you're doing like more myofascial type stuff. So it's like, of course it's going to feel different. The technique is going to feel different. You're bracing, you're breathing. Like you're not going to be going like for 12 reps, like for 12 singles. It's like, you're just not going to do it. You might hold your breath and do like 4 or 5 reps and then re-air. But it's just not the same, And so you're trying to develop skills, you're trying to develop all these things, but you're just, I think being able to let go of that. And again, that's why I said it's kind of an experience thing, is because when you do it enough times, you just know that when you get back into it, you're like, oh yeah, this is how I feel, but how I feel is fucking stupid because, I know that that's not true. And this is just an emotional response. I need to just chill, let it go, trust the process, go through it. And then when you get back there, it's like, oh yeah, exactly what I, suspected. I'm way stronger now. And I'm hitting, like 20 pounds away from my old 1RM, but I'm doing them for like multiple sets of triples. Okay, that's pretty solid. I don't feel that beat up. It feels pretty easy. So it's like, okay, that's a very clear indication that you're getting stronger. And so
one of the tipping points I found with that, which is kind of funny, is and I'm sure you have seen and know people that have been the same way, that something gets hurt, their shoulder gets hurt, or maybe they tear a bicep or something. Then they have to take time off. Then usually what comes after that statement is, man, I tore my bicep, so it's going to take 6 weeks. So I may as well, during this time, take care of my lower back being jacked up, my knee being jacked. As soon as they start saying that, so it goes from just, I'm going to find ways to train through this bicep issue, which that's the default, that's the meathead default thing, like whatever, safety squat bar, I'm not changing shit. Everything, they're going to do everything the same way. They're just going to train through it. To this is screwed up, so I'm going to now address all the other things. Shortly after that, that starts to become implemented across the board through the whole annual plan, either into blocks for that or, mini blocks for that, or prehab work, which is probably not as effective because it's more maintenance of that, which we'll go back into this phase that we're talking about, because once you get through that phase, you can restore all those abilities. But once you start going into other phases, those abilities will dissipate unless you have something. This is where it gets confusing with people with the blocks, right? Unless you have something residual that's kind of in there just to maintain that ability, where I think what some of the people are trying to do with the strength aspect is to keep something residual in there to keep the absolute strength ability through those other blocks, where personally I don't think that's necessary, but I get why they would think that. Now, for what we're talking about, I do think it's necessary. And for hypertrophy, I think it's necessary as well, because you can run these athletes through a 6-week hypertrophy block, which happens twice a year. So 12 weeks of the year, they're actually training to build muscle. How much muscle are they really going to build up? National level bodybuilders hoping to put on 6 pounds of lean body mass a year with PEDs, training that ability all the
Year
time.
round.
Like
Yep.
you ain't going to put shit on
No.
in the 6 weeks. You're going to become, your conditioning will be better. Your, muscular endurance might be a little bit better, but you're not going to put a whole lot of muscle on. Like,
if you're lucky, you probably regain what you lost in the season.
yes,
in the 6
yes,
weeks
yes,
there.
yes. But if you have if it's integrated in some way, then I don't think you're going to build as much, but you're not going to lose.
Yeah, for sure.
Which that used to be, actually it was, that was one of the big kicks against just straight linear periodization that I ran into all the time before I got to Westside. Is I would build up, and start the training heavier and bigger than I ever was, because the whole off-season time was bodybuilding type stuff. Then as soon as I started dropping to 5s, which over time became sooner and sooner and sooner, because 8s suck, but they're also kind of what you do anyhow. 6 weeks later, now I'm down 10 pounds. So I'm losing, because that's all I'm doing.
Yeah.
It's just that main thing, maybe ab work and shit like that, but nothing to really maintain that ability. I think one of my first articles on T Nation was ragging against, linear periodization because of this, but obviously what I did not put in there is how you could actually maintain those abilities throughout that whole thing. But that wasn't the point of the article. The point of the article was to kind of show, the downsides of all that and the upsides of conjugate, because that's what we have to do as writers is, balance this weird line instead of showing all the new, because everything works. Everything can work, right, if the nuance is taken into account. But as authors, we run into that weird balance.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
Like, you have to put your flag in the sand at some point, whilst also respecting that, where I put my flag is different to where you put your flag, but they're both right. Which, trying to explain that without confusing people gets really difficult, right? But what generally doesn't work is taking what I think is a great training plan, taking what he thinks is a great training plan, going, well, I'll do half of that and half of
no,
that.
that's a problem.
That doesn't work, right? That's when stuff starts going wrong. But if you obey all the rules of the system, whatever that system is, they all work.
Yeah, I think that's better. I may be ignorant on this one. I think that's better today, because I used to call that program hopping, during the ebook decades, where everybody had the 10-week program, 12-week program, whatever it was. They would go from one program, right? It could be completely different, vastly different. It's like, oh shit. It's like none of these programs should be 12 weeks, by the way.
No.
That's just a few blocks that should, extend out from that. And I think we've gotten further and further away from that as online coaching has grown and grown and grown. The answer to that would be, how long does your average client stay with you, right? If it's 12 weeks, then I'm incorrect, but I don't think that's the case.
No. And I think as a coach, you just have to plan beyond that anyway. Like if you're always looking for quick wins with a client, you'll get them, but then what do? Eventually their long-term progress will stall, because you're only going 12 weeks at a time, right? So you almost create a self-fulfilling prophecy there, I feel, because you'll get great results for 12 weeks and then it will be stagnant or whatever. Whereas, if someone buys in for long enough, they'll see the results that they're probably not getting elsewhere.
Yeah.
So I think coaches maybe who set up with that model almost create a rod for their own back in that regard, because, and then, that same client is starting to think, well, why am I paying you $200 a month when I can get a 12-week program for $80, $60, whatever it might be. And I know enough now, I can just take out back squat and put front squat because I prefer that, or whatever. The value of a coach is, it's like with nutrition coaching, you can correct me if you think this is wrong, but when someone hires you as a nutrition coach, you're not paying for the diet plan that you start with. You're paying for how they adjust it based on how you react to it as time goes on. And it's the exact same with the training program. The skeleton that you start with is, I've done the best I can with the information I have. Now we go and see how you react, and we tinker, which is usually why the relationship and the training should get more productive as it goes on. And I think it's, it's the same with the diet there. You're not really paying for that initial diet and like, oh, great, the coaching's done now. The coach's job is the objective tweaks that they make along the way that you're probably not able to make.
Yes.
A lot of the times too, I feel like, especially when you get a new client, and then also with clients you've had for a long time, it's really important to have sort of ongoing conversations to sort of set expectations. So if I sit down with a client and they tell me, hey, so I actually just got a new client, I think like the other day or whatever, he messaged me, signed up or whatever. And so he's not a competitive athlete, but he's pretty strong. And he's like, oh yeah, I want to deadlift like 750. And he's at like, I think 630 right now. Right. And so I was like, okay, cool. When someone has like a certain goal, and let's say it's a long-term goal, short-term goal, whatever, like I think it's really important to set the expectations, because a lot of the times when you start working with someone, not every time, but a lot of the times when you start working with someone, you're probably not going to start tackling like that goal exactly the way they think you are, because you're thinking more long-term. You're like, okay, these are the things that I'm seeing that you have an issue with. In order to get here, we need to first address this and this and this. Then once we do that, then we can start building out more exactly like what you were saying. You kind of have like this starting point. And for instance, if you're going to someone, so if I'm with someone and they want to like build a bunch of muscle, but they're like 20% body fat, I'm like, okay, first we need to get you lean, right? Because if you're 20% and we start a bulk, let's say you gain 15 pounds. I have zero idea if you've gained any muscle. Even if we gain at, quote unquote, an appropriate rate, I don't know how much muscle you've gained because you just you're too fat. I can't tell. Right. Whereas if we lean you out, and then first of all, while we're leaning you out, I really like to use that time as well to get the discipline, get the consistency, get the adherence, and then test it out through planned deviation. And that way, when you finish your cut, you've got all the requisite skill set. So now that you can bulk and you're not going to get over fat, right? Because the worst freaking thing in the world is getting lean and then bulking. So being super lean, having abs, all that stuff. And then you bulk up and you're like, yeah, you just lost everything because you didn't have that base, you didn't have that skill set. And that sucks. And I've done that a lot in the past. And so, having that conversation about like, okay, if this is your goal, we'll probably need to take this route, but this is why we're taking this route. Here's all the steps along the way. And that's a very, very different conversation than someone who's like, hey, I've got this comp coming up in 16 weeks and I just want you to peak me for it. It's like, that's not a lot of time, especially if you were the brand new like athlete, not brand new to them, but brand new to you as a coach. You've got to figure a lot of stuff out, but then at the same time, you kind of have to be conservative in some elements, because you don't want to just fuck up their peak experimenting and trying new stuff, because you don't have a whole lot of data to work with unless they have like a very extensive catalog of all their training history and stuff like that, which most people just don't. And so I think those conversations are super, super important, because they sort of set the foundation. And that way, when they come to you later on being like, hey, I feel like I'm not, doing this, what's going on? You can be like, hey, remember when we talked about this? We're not there yet. We're still in this phase, and you can kind of talk them off the ledge sometimes, because everyone gets a little, like, I get antsy sometimes, especially when I get to the last 2 weeks of the block. All I want to do is get to the next program, and I think that's kind of a feeling, maybe not, I don't know, maybe I'm just talking for myself, but I think that, some other people kind of have a similar mentality when you're like, you're doing like an 8 or 10 week block. You're just like, okay, I'm kind of done with this. I just want something new. Kind of like how when you get to the end of your comp prep, you're just like, I just want to compete and be over with. Sure. Like, you're just kind of done with it. And so, yeah, I think those conversations are super, super important, but they can really, really bolster their adherence. They can bolster their skill set. They can bolster, just the actual skill acquisition, because they really know what they're supposed to be doing throughout the entire thing. They know what they're trying to get out of it, and they know how that phase or block or whatever is going to facilitate better outcomes in the next phase. And so they can kind of put all those pieces together, a lot more effectively.
Well, I think that it's kind of going back to what we were talking to earlier, just in a more concise way, because if we look at, you have to be realistic of where you are, right? So a coach can help with that, or the person just needs to really think about where they are. So to use myself as an example, I always have one thing that I want to do before the end of the year, right? And it's a squat, and it's going to be stupid, and it's just what I am, right? And so, but once that phase is over, it could be November, whatever, it slides. Then when I'm looking at the next year, I got to be realistic. Like, for me to go back and to beat that again the next following year, where am I currently now? Like, what's fucked up? What's beat up? How much time do I need to back away from all this to let everything heal? And then being older, how can I, yes, I can put muscle on, but it's more about not losing muscle, because there's losing weight as well throughout the whole thing. And it's, once you start thinking this all through, you start realize it's going to be November. I don't have enough time to do this in 6 months. Otherwise, I'm going to skip something. Then if I skip something, I'm going to pay a price. So it's having the realistic expectations of, going from a 630 to a 750. That's cool, right? And for some people, maybe that can happen in a year. But are you even in shape to even start training hard enough to do the 630 again? Like, when did you do the 630? Like, where is all this? And when you're dealing with putting on muscle mass, I agree with what you're saying. I mean, if you're already 20% or higher, then good luck with your compliance, because there's a lot of shitty habits that you already have that have to be addressed. So if you start cutting, it's going to be harder for them because more habits need to change, right? But they'll see the difference. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Especially that 20%, they're going to lose, I don't know how big this person is, 14 pounds in the first 2 weeks, just blowing water out and all the other stuff. And then they progressively see they look better and better and better. That's better neural feedback for somebody to learn how to eat clean and eat correctly. Then we're going to start here and just go up and hope your body fat doesn't go up more. Good luck. How's that going to go? But you can't see, but the client can't see either. You know what I'm saying? So if they did put on 10 pounds of lean body mass under 22% body fat, what are they going to see? Maybe a bicep vein. You know what I'm saying is maybe at best what they're going to see is what they look like pumped. If there's even any change when they do get pumped, which there may not be. Either way, the habits have to be ingrained, so, and if that's happening, and as there's dieting down, that deadlift more likely isn't going to be going up radically. Maybe if technical issues and stuff like that, it will be. But as soon as they maintain and hopefully come out good, I've done what you've done as well, put on 40 pounds in a week after a cut. Look great, by the way, for the first 7 days, right? You're like, what the hell? And 7 more days, you're like a slob. It spills over. But that just makes that peak even better. Because then they're incrementally taking the weight back up to put muscle on. And it's there. But selling them on that, how do you go about doing that?